Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you just fine. I have already introduced you.
All right, Professor, thank you.
I've given all the chatter I can, so you can take it away.
All right. I just want to apologize. I mean, the reason for this is because the Republicans decided this morning to have another conference to see what they were going to do about electing a speaker. So, they don't hear me?
Oh, we hear you fine. No, you're coming through great.
They said they can hear us. They can hear me.
We hear you
All right,
great.
All right. So I just wanted you to understand what happened. It ended up delaying everything. We're now in the process of a vote, so I'm going to try to go through this quickly. And let me just thank you and Duke Law School Center for Innovation, for inviting me. As some of you know, I was elected last year to become the top Democrat on the Energy and Commerce Committee, and I obviously had big shoes to fill because I was following the footsteps of the former Chairman Waxman and former Chairman Dingell, and I believe it's important to maintain their legacy. And their legacy reaches all the way to the decor of our committee rooms. We still have a photo on the wall that was first hung by Chairman Dingell, and it's a picture that's about 10 feet tall of the Earth as seen from space. And whenever a younger member would ask why it was there, Chairman Dingell always got a twinkle in his eye, and he would boom back for all to hear and say, that's the jurisdiction of this committee, the whole Earth. So to be honest, our jurisdiction has changed some over the years, but I still have to keep up with a lot. But for all the complexity, I want to make sure that the committee is guided by a simple principle, and that is always put consumers first, because after all, I came to Congress to watch out for the little guy. With many of the issues we deal with, it's very easy to lose sight of the reason we're here. We get caught up in battles between companies or industries. We get asked to level the playing field for our industry. But we forget our main goal is to make sure the consumer is protected, and we must always strive to view all of our actions through the eyes of the consumer. So far in our committee, I think we've had a pretty successful year. We overwhelmingly passed the 21st Century Cures Act. We were also able to overhaul the Toxic Substance Control Act, which has been stuck in limbo for a number of years. And then in the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology, I was able to reach an agreement with the subcommittee chairman Walden and Representative Shimkus on the .com Act, which also easily cleared the House. So these bipartisan efforts aim to make sure consumers get better health care, they're safer when they go outside, and they have more robust experiences online. But passing this type of legislation does not happen without doing a lot of homework first, and that's why I've been determined to dive into the issues affecting consumers in all of the industries we oversee. And so I have been speaking with experts and leaders in the video market, and I wanted to make sure that as the industry moves ahead, consumers are not left behind. And what has already become obvious to me is that consumers of video are experiencing more changes than any industry in our jurisdiction. It seems the future of communications is video, and the future of video is online and mobile. But the truth is, I don't have to talk to experts to see what's going on. I just have to look around my living room. My kids do not watch TV the way I do. When the television flips on, the devices come out. And for my kids, video is an app. They don't believe in appointment television. They expect their content to always be available at their fingertips. And these changing expectations are not confined in my house, though. Across New Jersey and across the country, attitudes are changing, and they're changing fast. The dizzying pace of change in the video marketplace can be seen even in the few months since I became the ranking member. Streaming video services like Sling TV and HBO now receive a lot of attention, but they're hardly alone. Every day seems to bring announcements of new services, and of course everyone will be watching to see if Apple TV does to video what the iPhone did to the cell phone. But innovation is hardly limited to newcomers. These new options are driving traditional video providers to be creative. Even the bloated old channel bundles are getting a new look. In the past several months, we've seen the introduction of the skinny bundle, TV packages with a fraction of the channels of what they used to be, and broadcasters who play such a critical role during emergencies like Hurricane Sandy are also exploring new technologies and new ways to distribute their content. And all of these new services are attempts to respond to consumer demands. Consumers were tired of paying so much for television. They did not want to be forced to buy channels they never watched, and that's why cable companies now have more broadband customers than pay TV subscribers. And the drive towards mobile video helped fuel the $40 billion spectrum auction that the FCC ran earlier this year. And because not all of us are the same, not all video services should be the same, those differences can be seen in the way Hispanic viewers are adopting direct-to-consumer video content at a higher rate than other demographics. And the diversity among viewers is driving the industry, too. To meet the demands of this diverse group of viewers, the industry is creating more opportunities for minorities. So as policymakers, we should be taking our cue from the market. Are there places where we should be doing more or less to help consumers? We should also ask ourselves whether our intervention will help or hurt consumers. And as I look through that lens at the future of video, I have two recommendations for those of us in Washington. The first one is that we should hit the pause button on regulating streaming video. Some have urged the FCC to help prop up video business models through additional regulation. The companies that first asked for help claimed that new entrants must be defined as cable companies if they're to get access to content. And they were essentially worried that they could not compete with traditional cable companies without importing cable regulations to the online world. But consumer demand since then has driven the market to create new business models and new ways to distribute programming. It's certainly true that even in today's changing video landscape, my office still hears complaints from consumers about their pay TV providers, mostly about high programming bills or about blackouts. But so far, I have not been hearing from constituents that they can't find the shows that they want. I think that's because content is starting to break free from the traditional models. Networks have learned to supplement their old revenue streams by selling some of their shows to competing online providers. And some of these shows are older reruns, but some are new content. In this market, consumers are beginning to have more programs to choose from, more ways to get them, and more options on prices. On the other hand, regulating certain business models does risk stifling innovation. The online video market is still burgeoning, but right now we can't know what business models consumers will prefer, and we can't know yet how to craft the proper consumer protections. So to be clear, the FCC is doing a lot of good work. It should continue to better understand how the world is changing. It should keep asking the tough questions about the video market, and it should relentlessly examine the impact on consumers. But when it comes to adopting new policies, we all must ask ourselves whether new policies actually make people better off. In the case of defining online video providers as cable companies, I don't think we can say yes. Until we all better understand the ultimate impact on consumers, the FCC should avoid adopting sweeping new regulations. And this doesn't mean that the government has no role. The video market is not perfect. I know my constituents are tired of ever-increasing monthly bills. We all know that pay TV prices have significantly outpaced inflation. So as policymakers, we have an obligation to ask why that is. And that's what brings me to my second point, which has to do with sports. And I know some of you may have heard that I have some opinions about fantasy football. And it's true that anyone who's watched TV over the past few months may think the ads for daily fantasy have too much to do with the present video. But don't worry, I'm not going to try to jam that into this speech. I'm not going to talk about fantasy sports. But you don't get it off that easy. I do have something to say about sports, because the fact is you can't have a complete conversation about how consumers will get content for the next decade without acknowledging one of the biggest players in the market, and that's the NFL. And that's why I think we need to ask whether the NFL's antitrust exemption still benefits consumers. As I studied the video market, I kept hearing the same refrain: we will not see dramatic changes until 2022. So what's so special about that date? The truth is, the answer surprised me. It's not that we expect a major technological breakthrough. It's that 2022 is when the NFL's current long-term contract with the TV networks expires. So if you forgive me, I think it may be helpful to rewind for a moment before we move forward. Back in the late 1950s, the NFL consisted of 12 teams and was competing with another pro football team called the AFL for supremacy. Some of the NFL's teams were valued at less than $1 million. The team owners made most of the money from ticket sales. The 12 teams realized that they could better compete for television dollars if they could negotiate together as one unit. Unfortunately for the league, the courts ruled that this arrangement violated antitrust laws. So Congress stepped in to help the league and its fans by passing the Sports Broadcasting Act in 1961. And that new law allowed all of the NFL's teams to negotiate together as a monopoly when dealing with broadcasters. The hope was that giving the league negotiating power would mean more fans could watch the games they want. But now let's fast forward 5 decades to 2011. The law has been a rousing success. The NFL and AFL merged decades ago, and the NFL now has expanded to 32 teams. The most valuable teams have grown from million-dollar franchises to being valued at more than $4 billion. And television revenues have allowed teams to pay single players over $20 million a year, even adjusted for inflation. That's more than double what entire teams were worth before Congress passed the Sports Broadcasting Act. And using its monopoly power, the NFL negotiated a new broadcasting contract in 2011. The contract extended for 10 years and was valued at $27 billion. That's a 60% raise from the previous contract. And these costs eventually get passed along to the consumers. More than that, the NFL was able to put tight limits on the ways that networks could distribute their content. And although Congress gave the NFL its antitrust exemption for dealing with broadcasters, the league operates as one unit to negotiate multi-billion-dollar deals with cable and satellite distributors, cable companies, cable channels, and online services. Between all these deals, some estimate that the NFL's programming costs account for the most substantial portion of all sports programming costs. So here we are now, nearly 5 years after the NFL signed its current broadcasting contract. The video market is evolving faster and in ways that no one could have expected in 2011, let alone in 1961. And who can say one innovation could be possible by 2022? So I believe we have an obligation to ask what effect the NFL's antitrust exemption is having on consumers and fans in today's market. We should also understand whether the league is operating as a monopoly and they're dealing with other distributors. And that's why I think we should more closely investigate the issue. We must ask the simple question: what impact does the NFL's program contracts have on all consumers? At the same time, I want to make sure that fans can still watch your local teams no matter what. So to be fair, the exemption may still be a benefit in today's market, but it's possible that it's become a multi-billion-dollar handout to a special interest. And so there you have it. I know everyone here has had a long morning, so I'm going to end. I'm sure you're anxious to head home for the weekend. But thank you again to Professor Benjamin for inviting me, and to the Duke Law School Center for Innovation Policy for hosting. Again, I apologize. This all has to do with the election of a speaker on the Republican side. But, understand that you're debating very important questions. The answers will have a lasting impact on the future. But I think we'll all be better off when we remember to put consumers first, and that's always what I'm going to be trying to do, is to put consumers first. So thanks a lot. I don't know if with the votes, are we going to have time for questions, or what's the story? How much time is left?
I'd be happy to ask you a couple of questions if you have a couple.
Well, let me just see how many. The time is here. How many members haven't? One question. All right. I will take one question because the time has expired, but there's a few people that haven't voted. All right. This was a bill that I was managing too, so I don't want to miss the vote. But go ahead.
Here's the one question. So I'm actually interested. Look at the video marketplace. What has surprised you the most? What changes happened that has been the most surprising to you that you've seen?
In terms of the video marketplace?
Yeah.
Well, I don't want to say that I'm an expert on all the new ways people are watching TV. Believe me, I'm not. But I'm always struck by how many kids don't watch the way I do. When I grew up, we had 3 channels. And I won't even tell you how old I am, but we could schedule dinner around when our favorite shows came on, and we often did. And then we'd all huddle together around the TV and watch our show together. So for my kids, whenever we put on the TV, they pull out their computers. And I wasn't even sure if we were watching the same thing I was. And now my kids have gone off to college overseas. They don't bring the TVs with them, but they did bring their laptops and tablets and phones, and they can still watch anything they want whenever they want. So, I mean, this is great for consumers because they have more options than ever before. But I continue to be amazed, by these changes and how quickly they're occurring.
One last question. Is there a betting line on who the next speaker is going to be?
My opinion is that, what happened this morning is they had a conference because they're trying to persuade Paul Ryan to run. But supposedly he said no. And so now it's up for grabs. I think they're going to still try to convince him to run. But in the meantime, Boehner will stay. So there's really nothing new.
All right, and there'll be no fantasy betting on that. I'll make sure that happens.
No, that's only for fantasy sports.
All right, well, thank you very much, Representative Pallone, under these difficult circumstances.
All right, thanks a lot.